Hello, welcome to your first online writing lesson. I hope you're so excited to start this. I do want to begin with a very important disclaimer, and this is really, really important, I feel. The first thing you need to know about all these online videos is that I was pretty hesitant to publish them all at the same time so early in the semester. And I'm hesitant because I don't want you to watch all of them and then just feel so defeated and overwhelmed and think that you have to utilize or implement all of these writing tips into your first essay, because that is impossible. You will not master all of these tips and lessons at once. Writing is a process, it's an extensive process, and it takes lots and lots of practice. So please don't let these writing lessons overwhelm you, or please don't feel like you have to implement all of these in your first essays. The second disclaimer is that I want to apologize in advance for the lack of excitement in these videos. You know, I look on YouTube sometimes at these lessons, these online lessons that teachers create, and they're really impressive, and mine will not be. So don't get your hopes up on that. Okay, moving on. Let's start with our very first writing lesson, and that is on formality and bad words. So, what does formality mean? It means that you need to distinguish your voice in your writing and your voice in your conversation. You never want to write in an academic paper how you speak to your peers. Just as you would never write conversationally in an academic paper, it says just as you dress up for a job interview, you wouldn't show up wearing your t-shirt and gym shorts. You want to make yourself look great. You want to impress your audience, and the same applies in writing. So you should dress up your writing in academic situations. And how do you do that? Well, you avoid certain concepts. Number one is that you don't use slang. That's kind of a given. You don't use jargon, which we'll get to in, I think, another writing lesson. And you want to avoid cliches and idioms. What you do want to use is sophisticated vocabulary, and you can laugh and make fun of me all you want, but I actually have a thesaurus app on my smartphone. It was free. You can all be just as cool as I am and download it yourself, but I used the internet a lot. I used an online thesaurus a lot in college, and I still use this app today when I do my letters of recommendation. And you know, it takes an extra couple seconds to look up a nice word for a synonym that you can use, but it's well worth it. Thirdly, you want to write out your contraction words. You don't want to use like wasn't. You would want to actually write out was not. And there are some bad words we're going to talk about today, and I think in another lesson, probably the next lesson. But you want to avoid words like you, thing, I, stuff, it, or any variation of those words. So let's get started with that. I think all of you probably can distinguish the difference between formal writing and informal writing. It's totally okay to write informally in such genres as a journal, an email, a letter to your friend, a letter to your professor, maybe, depending on your relationship. But you cannot write in that same style, that same language, and expect to receive a good grade. A lot of our focus in these upper level courses like honors and AP is keeping your audience in your mind. And how are you going to appeal to your audience? Well, if you're trying to appeal to a teacher or a professor or someone that you respect in an authoritarian role, you want to impress them with your language. And so keep that in mind and take those extra measures to make sure that you are sounding very impressive and smart and intelligent, like I know that you are. Here's a handout that I may give you sometime throughout the semester, but it just has some additional tips and student samples from the past. A long time ago when I taught English 4, this was an English 4 honors class, we read the story Beowulf, the epic poem, and I had the students write a literary analysis, and one student gave me this sentence in his essay. He said, Hrothgar seems like a cool dude, but I would not want him to be my leader. Beowulf is a straightforward bad A. And I laughed when I saw this. I mean, you just have to laugh. But I just think if this were a college paper or like something related to your job, you could be reprimanded or they would just make fun of you, but you would never want to do this and actually be taken seriously. The second thing is that you don't want to use a lot of idioms or cliched expressions. And so this is from the same essay. It says, Rothgar is a pretty good guy when the going is good, but when the crap hits the fan, he falls to pieces. For example, he's cool when the party's in full swing, but when Grendel comes in busting up the place, he loses all control. Now, this is just stock full of idioms and trite expressions, and while those have their place because they're relatable, people can identify with these phrases because they're familiar, in your academic writing, you want your language and your style to be unique and your own. And if you're using a lot of phrases that other people use often, your writing loses its originality. So while it's easy sometimes to describe things in idioms, you want to avoid them in your specific analysis. So what do? You need to use specific language. You need to use concrete examples. Quotes from the story is a given. You don't want to use the word you, and you don't want to use the word thing, and that's actually, I think, on the next slide. Again, you want to use that impressive vocabulary, grab a thesaurus, download an app, find one online, and use it because it's amazing. Excuse me. This is another student sample of someone that I had last semester, and this was a wonderful student and very, very intelligent. But we read Oedipus, and this was an analysis of Oedipus. It says the author characterizes Oedipus as a cocky and high-held kind of guy. He says to his people, "Here I am myself, you all know me." This gives a picture in your mind of a guy standing holding up his arm and preaching like a god almost. Along with this, he states, "The world knows my fame. I am Oedipus." He acts like everyone should know him, and if you don't, it's like you've been under a rock. Now, we'll start with the analysis. It's not bad. Like, clearly the student understood what happened in Oedipus, doing a little characterization here, character analysis. He's not wrong, but he's just presenting his analysis in a way that's very formal and conversational. If I were to ask this student to characterize Oedipus, and if he were to respond to me personally, he could say this and it would be perfect. But if you're taking time in a drafted essay, if you use words like guy in the idioms been under a rock, that shows me that, you maybe took the lazy route, didn't take enough time to really impress me with your writing, your language. So these are examples of how a student can take their analysis, their language, and improve it. Here is another handout that I may or may not give you throughout the semester, and these are 5 examples of idioms. And just the one thing to know about idioms is that if one pops in your head and you really want to use it in your analysis, take a few seconds and think about what the idiom means, and then just write it in your own words. So I've put up my examples up here. Number 1 says she had learned her lesson the hard way. Well, what does learning the hard way even mean? And so I would rewrite this idiom to say, she had regretfully learned her lesson through experience despite warnings. Number 2, the idiom here is disappeared at the drop of a hat. Well, what does that mean? It just means that her money disappeared suddenly. Number 3, we can get the show on the road is the cliched writing here, and so I would reword that in my own words by saying, we can leave in a timely manner. Number 4, if a situation is rotten to the core, it just means that it was thoroughly wrong. And yes, I do have a typo there. I forgot the verb. So let's just pretend that says the whole situation was thoroughly wrong. And then the last one, number 5, if someone is saving for the finer things in life, that just means she wanted a more luxurious life. So 2 other bad words that you want to avoid are you and thing. Again, you don't want to say you because you're talking directly to your reader and you want to avoid that conversational tone. So number 1 just says, have you ever wondered what happens to famous young Hollywood? Well, I kind of have two issues with this sentence. Young Hollywood really just means like young celebrities, so let's just reword that. But rather than saying you, this is an easy fix. You can replace the word you with one, with society, or with humanity. And so what I did is I just said, has society ever considered what happens to famous young celebrities? Number two, I see a lot in writing, and I think you're just trying to use a nice transitional phrase, which is a good thing. But rather than say, as you can see, you can just say, as one can see. Or if you just want to reword that transition altogether, just say, consequently, the effects of fame are cruel and harsh. You don't want to say thing because what is the definition of thing? We don't really know. It's not specific, and you want your writing to be very specific. So I reworded number one. It says a hero is a person who has done something unbelievable and extraordinary. Well, I just kind of rephrased it and structured it to say a hero is a person who has accomplished unbelievable and extraordinary achievements. Number two is kind of a cliche in itself. It says this comes by doing the little things. So I asked myself, what does that mean? And I said, this comes by accomplishing seemingly insignificant tasks. And again, it takes a while. It might seem nerdy or nitpicky, but once you read your finished product and you see that you avoid cliches, you avoid idioms, you avoid bad words, my bad words, you will be impressed with how smart you sound and how analytical you can sound. And that's it. That's my first writing lesson. I hope you enjoyed it immensely. Your mind is blown and you're ready to become better writers. And you can do that by watching the rest of the videos. But don't feel overwhelmed. Thanks for watching.